Hello, and welcome to our Toronto. Today we're going to talk about bus rapid transit lines, or BRTs as they're called, and why Toronto could benefit from more of these. BRTs are essentially express bus routes that operate in their own dedicated right-of-way lanes on streets. The main advantage of BRT lines is that it allows buses to take passengers by the masses to their destinations without getting stuck in traffic. Existing examples of these could be found in Ottawa, Mississauga, and probably one of the best examples of these is the Viva BRT that operates along Highway 7. Now, we do have some right-of-way bus lanes in Toronto, but not very many. So let's start by taking a look at the advantages that more BRTs would offer the TTC here in Toronto. Firstly, it would take very little in the way of cost and construction to turn more lanes of traffic during rush hour to dedicated right-of-way lanes for buses compared to any other option. It would not take any more investment in vehicles, land acquisition, or the displacement of homes or businesses in the community. Essentially, this is something that we could do overnight. Using a BRT would be much more flexible in terms of service levels. Vehicles could easily be added or removed based on service demand changes. Vehicle sizes can also be increased during rush hour services if demand requires it. This is something that is much more difficult to do with any other rapid transit, train, or streetcar option. The speed at which we would be able to introduce BRT systems into Toronto would be much faster. We would not have to wait 10 years for a subway to be constructed. Toronto used to implement streetcars and trolley buses along routes before, as they were a greener and less polluting option. However, now that we have electric buses and these options available to us, it makes this option even cheaper and more appealing. I don't think that we need to look up statistics to know that buses that would operate in their own right-of-way lanes in Toronto would definitely allow transit vehicles on the road to move faster. So then why are we not doing this more in Toronto? Well, there are probably two main reasons for this. Firstly, there is the perception by most that this is not an efficient method of transportation, and certainly not as efficient as subways or light rail transit. While it is true that buses will never be able to move as many people and as fast as subways can, the idea of Toronto being accessible by subways by everyone everywhere is nowhere in sight, while buses continue to sit in traffic all over the city during rush hour. But since the buses are always seen sitting in traffic on our city streets, this gives the perception that buses are a lousy option. A simple, fast, and relatively cost-efficient way to solve this problem would be to create a dedicated right-of-way lane for buses. This can also be a solution to routes temporarily while we wait for the subway to be built. This is being created between the Scarborough Town Centre station to Kennedy Station while the Scarborough subway is being built in place of the Scarborough RT. But why can't all bus routes operate in right-of-way lanes in Toronto during rush hour? Well, another reason that bus right-of lanes are not being rushed out everywhere throughout the city is simply political. If a lane of traffic were to be shut down on all of the main streets in Toronto where there is a bus route that operates, this would without question make traffic congestion worse for all those that want to take their cars. This would give any politician pause, because this could cause gridlock on some of the roads given the current traffic congestion on streets during rush hour. This is not to mention all of the public backlash that they can get from all of the car-owning public. However, there is a rational argument that could be made for the case of making every main road in Toronto with 2 lanes or more that has a bus route to have a right-of-way lane during rush hour. The best example of this is St. Clair Avenue, where the streetcar has its own right-of-way lane. It cuts the lanes down on St. Clair to just 2 or even 1 in some locations for cars. This is very similar to the design that is used on Viva's BRT on Highway 7. In the 70s, St. Clair Avenue had to be expanded in order to make it possible to accommodate this additional right-of-way lane for the streetcars. Even just this stretch of road got a lot of public backlash and protest when this was proposed. People did not appreciate all of the construction, the time that it would take, the cost, and insisted that this would remove from the vitality of the street and negatively affect businesses. However, exactly the opposite happened. Now, if you travel on St. Clair, it takes about the same amount of time to travel along the street using a car as it does to take the 512 streetcar. Some may argue that then why should they take the streetcar if it takes the same amount of time as it does to take the car? Well, the answer to that ignorant question would be, how long do you think it would take to take the car if the streetcar along this right-of-way did not exist? If Toronto were to place right-of-way lanes on all of its streets tomorrow and close these to other vehicle traffic during all rush hours, then there is no question that there will be a lot more traffic congestion on our streets. But that would only be until all of the people in their cars saw the buses passing them by at full speed. Eventually, many people will switch over to taking the bus, and that would help the traffic to clear. This is exactly what has happened on Don Mills along the stretch between York Mills and Finch Avenue. Don Mills used to be one of the most congested north and south roads in the city. This is because of the very dense residential area in the Shepherd area. When the right-of-way lanes were first introduced, traffic did get worse for about a year, but then started to subside after that. Now there is even less traffic along that stretch of Don Mills, where there are 3 lanes and only 2 are open during rush hour, even with 1 less lane available for traffic to use. When the right-of-way lanes were first introduced, traffic did get worse for about a year, but then started to subside. Now there is even less traffic along that stretch of Don Mills, where there are 3 lanes and only 2 open during rush hour, even with 1 less lane available for traffic to use. The final reason or excuse, to be more accurate, that is given for more right-of-way lanes not being allocated in the city for transit vehicles is that buses are not really moving faster because of the lack of enforcement. This may have some truth to it, but that could simply be solved by placing enforcement cameras. They do have them for speeding throughout the city, don't they? Of course, there will always be the die-hard people that will insist on dying in traffic if they have to stay in their cars. But reality is that if you make traffic bad enough at the cost of making transit better, this usually works. This is one of the most viable ways that the City of Toronto could make changes to improve traffic flow efficiency in the city using the existing transit infrastructure that we have. Now, I'm not going to be judging anyone's life choices, but if it came down to sitting in traffic for hours versus taking a bus that is moving fast, I think some people may reconsider their choices. But I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with wanting to sit in your car in traffic for hours on end. I don't have to understand that to respect your right to do so. But it's the same as when people complain about the roads being closed in downtown Toronto because of the construction of the Ontario line. If only there was a subway that you could take to and from downtown. So then why are we not making more dedicated right-of-way bus lanes in Toronto? Well, here are all of the reasons that the government gives us every time it comes up. I hope that you liked the video. If so, please give it a like. If you're not subscribed and want to be notified of new videos that are released, please click on the Art Toronto button here. This is the video that I would recommend for you to watch next, and I'm sure that you're going to love it. Here's the playlist for all of the latest in transit news and views that you're going to find very informative and interesting. And finally, here is the latest video. Thanks for watching and happy transiting.